Hello, my name is Eliza. They said it was an accident, that I panicked during the flood, that maybe I misunderstood what happened, but I remember the sound of the lock clicking. I remember the water rising. I remember screaming her name through the vent while she stood upstairs, silent. My sister didn't just leave me behind. She sealed the door shut and made sure no one would believe me. They called me unstable, dramatic, too sensitive to trust with the truth. But if I was so fragile, why did she work so hard to silence me? And what else had she already erased before they finally heard me scream? The power had gone out sometime after midnight. I couldn't tell exactly when. It wasn't like I'd been sleeping peacefully. My brain had been half awake for hours, turning over useless thoughts and trying to tune out the heavy hum of the lavender diffuser my sister insisted I run every night. "It'll help you relax," she'd said, slipping the plug into the outlet like she was doing me a favor. At first, I thought the dripping I heard was coming from the kitchen sink. Then I realized it was too slow, too deliberate, like water finding its way through wood. The room felt heavy, a dampness clinging to the sheets. I swung my legs off the bed and stepped onto the floor. It was cold, wetter than it should have been. I reached for my phone. No bars, dead screen, of course. I shuffled to the hallway and blinked. The baseboards were bleeding water, just a thin stream, but growing. The carpet squished underfoot, and the only light in the house came from occasional flashes of lightning slicing across the living room. I could hear the river again, or maybe it was the bayou. Either way, it was louder than it had ever been. I grabbed the flashlight from the hall drawer, the one Sable kept stocked with batteries like she was always preparing for a disaster. She told me once, "If something ever happens, don't wait, go straight to the basement. The sump pump will keep us safe." The words echoed in my ears as I made my way to the basement door. I flipped the latch, opened it slowly. A heavy mustiness hit me, that smell you can't quite name. Mold, old dirt, wet concrete. The air felt like it had weight. I descended the stairs slowly, one step at a time. My light cut through the darkness in sharp angles. The basement looked normal. No panic yet, just wet walls. The pump was quiet. Then it happened. A metallic click, sharp, decisive, from behind me. I turned instinctively, racing back up 2 steps, but the door had slammed shut. My hand reached the knob. I twisted. Nothing. I pushed, still nothing. I twisted again harder. It rattled but didn't budge. No, my heart dropped into my stomach. I banged the door. Sable, no answer. Sable, still nothing. I pounded harder, fist to wood, then shoulder to door. Let me out. Water dripped down from the staircase above, cold and relentless. I pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing but storm, and that's when I saw it. The flashlight beam swept across the inside of the door. A glint, a flash, the edge of a padlock. New, clean, drilled into the frame. I blinked hard. The same door that had always opened freely, now sealed from the outside. Who the hell had locked it? No, who else would have locked it? It was new. I knew the basement like the back of my hand. That wasn't there yesterday. It couldn't have been. A different kind of fear spread through my chest. Not the fear of water, not yet, but the fear of knowing something had changed and I wasn't meant to know it. I started to shake. Not because of the cold, though there was plenty of that, but because everything in my body wanted to scream, run, escape, but there was no place to go. I pulled my phone again, still dead. No charger, no backup. That wasn't allowed in the house anymore. Not for me, at least. The water on the floor had risen. It was now at my shins. The sump pump remained silent. I checked the switch. Dead. I screamed again. "Somebody please, I'm locked in." I reached the only window in the basement, too small to crawl through, just a slit near the ceiling, facing the backyard. The rain pelted it like bullets. My flashlight flickered once, then held steady. That's when I knew I couldn't rely on anything but myself. I dragged over a box, then another, stacking them until I could reach the vent above the window. I stood, knees wobbling. I pressed my mouth to the metal slits. "Help, I'm in here, please." Silence, then voices garbled. Outside, a shout, movement. I banged the metal with the flashlight. "Down here, I'm down here." A beam of light cut across the backyard and then footsteps. My body tensed. Was it her? Sable. I whispered, no reply, just a low voice. "Male, you hear that?" My heart slammed against my ribs. I leaned closer to the vent. "I'm locked in the basement." I screamed. "Help." The doors sealed from the outside. "Ma'am," a voice called. "Can you repeat that?" I didn't hesitate. "My sister locked me in the basement. She wants me dead." There was a pause. I heard another voice, calmer but closer. "Keep talking to me. All right, you're going to be okay." I sank to my knees, sobbing. For the first time, someone had heard me. Not the version Sable curated, not the troubled teen narrative. Me. The water touched the bottom of the boxes. The air smelled metallic. The light outside bounced, flickered, then steadied again. Footsteps scrambled up the side of the house. Then the sound of a walkie-talkie crackling. One man shouted, "We've got a visual, basement window, partial blockage." Another answered, "Get the gear," she said. "It's locked from the outside." I let my head rest against the vent. The rain poured harder, but my words, my truth, had finally pierced the storm. I held my breath, ears straining. The creak of the door hadn't come from inside, and it hadn't come from me. It was deliberate, slow, controlled, like someone didn't want to be heard but didn't care if I knew. That was worse. I froze, barely above water, crouched by the vent where I'd last screamed. A shape passed outside the narrow window, a blur low to the ground. It was gone before I could catch more than a shadow. I didn't call out this time. I'd learned when to be loud and when silence was safer. My legs were cramping, soaked. The water had crept past my knees now. Each shift sent a ripple through the murky flood around me. I backed away from the window, keeping my eyes on that corner of the room like it might move again. When nothing did, I slid against the wall and tried to breathe without choking on the thick, wet air. Then, out of nowhere, the past crashed into me like my body couldn't keep the memory locked down anymore. It wasn't the first time I'd been trapped down there. 6 months ago, I tried telling someone. It had taken me weeks to work up the courage to say it aloud, to tell an adult, any adult, that Sable had locked me in the basement once before. My hands had been shaking when I sat down in front of Ms. Durney, the school counselor. She was kind, at least I thought she was. She handed me tissues before I'd even said a word. But I did tell her. I told her everything I could manage between shallow breaths and too much shame. "I think my sister's not safe for me," I'd whispered. Ms. Durney had nodded slowly, eyes soft behind her big round glasses. "What makes you say that, Eliza?" So I told her about the day it first happened. It was a Tuesday, my birthday. I was 12. I'd forgotten to clean the kitchen like I promised, and I knew she'd be mad, but I didn't expect what came next. Sable walked in while I was setting the table for my own cake. Mom wasn't home. Dad had already bilayed years ago. It was just the two of us that afternoon, and I remember her voice being weirdly sweet. "Come here," she said, smiling too hard. "I left something in the basement for you, a surprise." I blinked. "A surprise? Yeah, but you have to close your eyes. It's tradition. I knew better, but I wanted it to be real. I wanted one day, one birthday where she wasn't awful, so I went. I even smiled a little." She walked behind me as I headed down. Then the door slammed loud. Final. I screamed. Of course I did. I kicked the door, begged. She didn't come back for 8 hours. When she did, she tossed me a peanut butter sandwich and said, "You could have gotten out, you're just too lazy to try." When I told my mother later, she didn't even lift her eyes from her magazine. "Eliza, you've always had an active imagination. Don't dramatize." That night, I wrote it all down in my notebook. Then I tore the page out and burned it in the backyard. Because I didn't want anyone to find it, because part of me believed it was my fault, too. After I told Miss Benderney all of this, she nodded again. She said she'd talk to my sister. I asked her not to, but she insisted it was protocol. The next morning, Sable showed up at school in her nicest sweater, her makeup perfectly smudged to look like she'd been crying. She sat in the front office talking softly with the principal. By the time I was called in, she was already painting the story. "She's been acting out at home," Sable said. "Since our dad left, she's not been herself. I'm scared she might hurt herself or someone else." The counselor's face dropped. We had no idea. Of course they didn't. Sable was a professional at this. By lunch, I was suspended for disruptive false accusations and concerning behavior. I spent the rest of the week in my room. No phone, no internet, just Sable knocking on my door at odd times to whisper, "Keep talking, and next time it won't be 8 hours." Now knee-deep in rising water, I remembered that moment with an eerie sense of déjà vu. And yet this time something was different. I didn't feel small anymore. I didn't feel crazy. I felt awake. The water lapped against my thighs. The air grew thinner, more humid. I stood slowly, pushing soaked hair from my eyes. My flashlight was nearly dead, just a soft circle of glow left. But I coo.